Chapter 10. In the Mood to Be Intoxicated. At breakfast, Sterling was grateful that Austen seemed to be over his fury of the day before. He rushed through his meal to be on time for a quick poker game in Denny's cabin. "What's the hurry?" Austen asked, fully aware of what day it was. Sterling smiled proudly, and in broken German replied, "The time has come to make my pockets bulge." Before Austen could comment, there came a quick knock at the door, and Lucas bounced in. "Morning, Austen!" He hopped up onto his usual chair and looked at Sterling. "Morning!" "Morning, Luke," Sterling greeted. Do me a favour. Go down to the galley and get a tray for the girls and take it to their cabin." This would give him more time for the card game. Luke hopped back down. "Okay." Sterling followed Lucas to the door, then turned back to Austen. "Wish me luck?" He asked to test if things were all right between them. "Aye. Good luck." Austen lay on his bed, deciding he could think things through more comfortably there than from behind his desk. The burgundy chair he'd brought up from below deck was not broken in yet, and was far from as inviting as the green chair he'd sent back to Lady Gratsworth. Hearing the door close, he sighed. At least Sterling was back to normal, back to his card games, with not a care in the world but for the money to come. Another knock interrupted his thoughts. "Aye?" He sat up to find Josh coming into the cabin. "Mornin', Cap. No need to be getting up on my account." Austen smiled, putting a lazy hand behind his head as he made himself comfortable again. Josh sat himself down. "When do you think you'll be telling the men about the map? They're starting to notice we're off course." "Already? I wanted to talk to Dante first. Any sign of company?" "No. We appear to have the sea to ourselves. And you needn't be asking about enemy ships. If any are spotted, you'd be the first to know." Austen brushed a lock of hair from his face. "When they get restless enough, I'll tell them." There was a short silence as Josh got to his original reason for the visit. "You seem to be a bit restless yourself, lad." He raised a knee. "Aye, I have a lot on my mind." "Like our visitors?" Josh asked, sucking on his tooth. "Aye, and the treasure, Franz, Dante's wife." "And Sterling?" he asked, feeling he had to make Austen talk. He'd spent 25 years of his life with this man, and knew him like a son. It wasn't easy for the younger man to talk out his troubles, but if Austen didn't talk things out, he'd blow up without warning. He'd turn into a madman for days on end, then after a week or so retreat, exhausted. Austen sighed. "Sterling is Sterling." "That he is." Austen smiled at the older man. "Appreciated, but there's no need to coddle me. I must be losing my touch." Austen upright knee-rocked back and forth. "We've been through this so many times." "Right then. No coddling," he said, taking on a new approach. "Tell me of those pretty little lasses." "They're just a complication," Austen answered, shifting a bit. "And they be on board because Sterling." Of course." "What's the lass like?" Josh ventured, narrowing the conversation to the one who had Austen all riled up. "Trouble. She's a woman," he answered simply. He found this statement disturbing. She's a woman. Why had he called her that when he continually told himself she was just a girl? From society's viewpoint, she was the perfect age for marriage. Yet she was so different from the types of women he usually surrounded himself with. He liked his women mature. Perhaps you could even say jaded. Women who would not expect any kind of commitment from him. He could not let himself form emotional bonds. In his experience, those relationships did not end well. "Sterling doesn't seem to think much of them." Austen scoffed. "Why would he? He's left the whole mess on my shoulders." 'Tis not the first time. She be a beauty, that's for sure. She's a born brat, is what she is. Ah. Josh now understood. Austen's view on born brats was well known among his crew. They'd witnessed the struggles he'd had with them, and they understood his hostility. She walks around as if the ship belongs to her. Entertain me, amuse me, feed me. Well, that last one. She called me a savage pig, Josh. Me! Josh had to hide his smile. I had nothing to do with them being here. I definitely never wanted them here. Yet she berates me, all the while laughing and joking with Sterling. He gave them playing cards. And not just any cards, he thought. Those were the cards given to him by Marcos Azevedos, owner of a gambling house he'd frequented in Brazil. A fine man and friend. His cards. So, laddie, what are you going to do with them? Austen shook his head in answer. Josh thought it his duty to be sure Austen understood the situation. We're already going to be a month late to France. Austen stood. Aye, I'm sure you're aware, but they can identify us. Aye, I'm aware. She actually knows me by 3 identities. The biggest problem is, she's a friend of the Buxton family. From the Bank of England? Aye. Oosh. So she knows you as Lord Langsing and Captain Austen. We'll have to finish France before giving her the chance to make that connection known. Agreed. But what do I do with her? Leave her on the island? What of her family? She was about to be married. She has a life waiting for her. And the alternative? Josh offered. Take her home? Take the chance she talks? Exactly. The entire crew is in danger. We will have to find new ports for England and France. We won't be able to use those covers now that they've been seen. If she talks and the authorities arrest us in that cove, it would mean death for everyone. We can't risk going back to England for quite some time. He swiped his hand through his hair. Josh added, a good part of the crew have families in England. Aye. She won't be knowing the exact location of the island, but she be knowing more than most. How long it takes to get there from England, and that it's tropical. I can't pay her off like I would others to get out of situations. She has no need for money. What else can I do? What would you do? Don't know what I'd do, lad. It's a predicament for sure. Have you talked it over with Sterling? Austen snorted. No. He'd be no help anyway. I am the captain. They are my responsibility. Jesus, the messes he gets me into. A knock sounded at the door. Who is it? It's Luke, milady. I've brought you breakfast. Just a second, Julienne called, crossing the floor to unlock the door, and was surprised to see a young boy. Good morning, milady. Sterling asked that I bring you your breakfast. Oh, come in, come in. The notion that a boy was on board had never crossed her mind. Sylvina bounced off the bed. I am Sylvina, and this is Jewel. I know all about you. You do? Julienne asked. Do you know what the captain plans to do with us? He shook his head. No one knows that. I suppose not. Then what do you know of us? Suppose not. Then what do you know of us? She asked playfully. I know you're really pretty. He answered in a tone that made it seem like a question. A blush rose to his face as he hung his head and giggled. Do you know how to play cards, Sir Lucas? I'm not a sir, but I know how to play cards. Can you teach us? Sterling brought us cards, but we don't know how to play. All right, I'm a good teacher. Actually, I can't. I have to get back, he said, eyeing the door. Captain hasn't been in a very good mood lately, so I think maybe I should check with him first. Was he afraid that Austen would catch him ignoring his duties? Was this boy also a captive? Every time she let herself begin to believe things would be fine, she was quickly reminded of her actual situation. She was a captive on a pirate ship, surrounded by men who killed for a living. This was no place for a young boy. Julienne brushed the blonde hair from his eyes. She had seen the captain's wrath. She could only imagine how frightened the poor boy must feel. How long have you worked on the ship? Luke shuffled his feet. I don't work here. I live here. I see. And since when? Since always. I have to go now, but I'll come back and teach you cards real soon. All right, Lucas. We'll be waiting. They exchanged smiles and Lucas was off. That poor boy, Julienne murmured. What do you mean? He's a child being brought up by pirates. What type of life is that? He looks fine. He looks kind of happy if you ask me. Happy? Have you heard the stories of the notorious Austen? They had to come from somewhere, even if they are exaggerated. Can you imagine how a man like that would treat a boy? You know, you're not making it any easier on him. On Lucas? Me? Austen has been disagreeable lately because of us. How do you know that? She asked, leaving the bed, a subconscious wish to leave the truth. He seems to be the disagreeable type by nature. At least partly because of us. Oh, just say it, Sylvina. You mean because of me. Well, you don't help. We should be kinder to Austen. How? When he's such a bore? You need to try. For Lucas's sake. Suppose I could try. But it wouldn't be easy. Just try smiling once in a while instead of being so defensive all the time. And don't call him names. But he deserves those names. Jewel. I will try. Sometime later, Julienne let her eyes wander about the room in search of some sort of entertainment. They settled and stayed upon the beam hanging the length of the ceiling. She watched it for a long time as her mind worked and schemed. I've got it, she announced, and Sylvina sat up in confusion. What? What have you got? Without answering, she bent down and pulled their gowns from beneath the bunk. I'm about to turn these pieces of fabric into something useful. She mimicked a magician they'd once seen at a fair. I have here a petticoat. A pretty purple petticoat. Sylvina pushed back her wayward curls and echoed dumbfounded. A purple petticoat? Right. Now, we take this petticoat and tie it by 2 corners above the bed to that beam, she said, stepping up onto the bed. Then tear one of the other petticoats into strips. A minor loss for a major invention. I'll get the other ones. We tie a strip to each of the lower 2 corners. Understand? I think so. Then wrap them around the bar at the end of the mattress and pull them. And we have a fan. Oh, a fan! Let's try it. They went to work, enthusiastically tying and ripping, wrapping and folding, unfolding and twirling, until a purple cloth fan contraption hung above the bed. Looks promising, Julienne replied. Let's lie down and pull the strings. They climbed in next to each other, each taking a string. Ready? They pulled in unison and received a glorious breeze. It works, Sylvina rejoiced. Julienne frowned as they waited for the material to float back to its original position. They pulled again. It needs weight, she commented, hopping from the bed. Weight? Sylvina saw no problem with their new invention. If we put something along the bottom hem, it will come back faster. What can we use? Shoes? She retrieved the shoes and again began wrapping and folding and tying until, though a bit bulky, it looked as though perhaps it might work. Try again, Julienne encouraged. Sylvina was already climbing back into the bed and grabbing a hold of her string. Pull, she said, before Julienne even had her string tightly in her hand. In a whoosh, the breeze rushed over them, their hair fluttering back against the pillow. Even better! Completely satisfied with their invention, of the cabin. They spent hours under their fan, switching sides from time to time so that their arms didn't become too tired. Sometimes the rhythm would slow, the calming breeze causing them to fall prey to a dreamy rest. They didn't notice the time slipping by until a knock broke into one of their dreamlike periods. Immediately, both were on their feet, excited to show off what they had devised. Julienne went and unlocked the door for Sterling, who smiled his greeting and put a tray on the table. "What is that?" "Want to see how it works?" Sylvina asked enthusiastically, but neither waited for an answer before they were on the bed demonstrating. "Look at that," he mumbled, scratching his head. "Want to try it?" Sylvina asked, happily escorting him to the bed. "Here, lie down. We'll do the strings." They stood at the head of the bed. "You ready?" "This isn't a trick, is it? It's not going to explode in my face or dump water all over me." They pulled the strings, and Sterling was buffeted with a fresh breeze. "Well, I have to admit, that is—" "Sterling!" They all turned abruptly to see Austen in the doorway. Sterling quickly sat up and the girls dropped their strings. Sterling didn't glance back as he walked silently out the door. Austen again caught Julienne's eye, giving her the overwhelming need to explain. "We were only—" she began, but her words fell on deaf ears as he turned his back on her and left the door slamming in his wake. Austen didn't bother confronting Sterling. If he thought honestly about the situation, he would have realised that he didn't want to see his friend because he was jealous of his easy relationship with their captives. But he wasn't in the mood to think. He was in the mood to be intoxicated. Satisfied that Sterling was giving orders to the men, he returned silently to his cabin. How was it that Sterling could commit this crime completely on his own, yet there he was, being fanned by his victims as if he was some god? And they thought me the devil. He took out a bottle of rum and poured himself a glass. He downed the liquid in 3 gulps, causing several complaints from his burning throat. Confident Sterling could handle the crew, he decided he wanted to be drunk and saw no reason against it. He pulled over the stack of charts he'd been studying earlier and stared at them blankly for a long time. "Savage pirate pig!" He poured himself another glass. Truth be told, Austen did not even consider himself a pirate anymore. Not the kind of pirate he grew up being. He liked to think of himself more as an entrepreneur, an expert at the long, intricate game of deception. His schemes sometimes took years to reach fruition, and he relished every second of the execution thereof. Sure, he conceded, there was a time when he had conquered ships at sea to scavenge for valuables. He couldn't deny the many battles he had seen, that he would call piracy, but it had been some time since that was his practice. He poured himself another glass and leaned back in his chair. He considered the crew his family. Most of them had sailed with Captain Blythe when he himself had just been a cabin boy. Between the men on the ship and the men on the island, Austen could not have asked for better people to be surrounded by. These men were his family. He poured himself his 4th glass and continued his journey to oblivion. He mulled over the thought of the comfortable lives they all could live back on the island. Wasn't that what this was about? What everything was all about? To live a bountiful and blissful life on the island? He usually spent months creating a plan which he could obsess about until he had every possible outcome covered at every possible level. Afterward, he'd execute that plan with adrenaline coursing through his body, collect his reward, and live a life of pleasure and satisfaction until the next endeavour. Sometimes he would relax on the island for months. Other times he would sail to different countries and indulge in activities he had discovered during previous trips. He would seek exotic cuisine, or elegant gaming establishments, ladies of beauty, or just the company of an old friend. He had always believed this was all he needed, all he wanted. That would be his perfect life. Catching movement from the corner of his eye, he turned to find Princess watching him. "Hey, Sis, have a drink with me." With a meow, she began to lick her fluffy chest, her eyes flashing that feline green for an instant when the light caught them just right. She finished grooming and advanced on Austen, jumping into his arms for his caress. "It's a good life we have, even if we do have to put up with Sterling." She purred contentedly at the sound of his voice. "Remember the time he capsized that boat full of women? Or that time where he was chased through the streets of Spain being shot at by their angry mother-in-law? Or when he won that camel in a card game and tried to bring it aboard a ship? Jesus. He was sat there petting Princess's soft white fur for a long time, reminiscing as he drained the contents of the bottle. Eventually, Princess stopped purring and fell asleep. Not quite ready for sleep himself, he turned his thoughts to Leela. No reaction. He thought of his time spent in Paris. Nothing. The first time they met. Nothing. No stirring of his blood, no smile. Nothing. This was indeed puzzling to him. Thoughts of Leela had always brought some form of reaction. He scowled at the bottle of rum. "This is your fault," he accused out loud. Yes, you. Don't deny it. You are the jealous woman wielding your powers over me, causing my indifference to other females. Well, you can just forget it. I have seen many good men drown themselves in women like you. He reached lazily for another bottle that was obviously beyond his grasp. He then turned his attention back to the empty bottle. Don't go getting any ideas. We're not talking about any long-term relationships here. I don't do those. I mean, you're all right once in a while, but so are the frozen northern waters. That doesn't mean I want to live with my bollocks in my throat. A chuckle from the doorway interrupted his discussion. Can I get in on this conversation? Sterling asked, sliding over the out-of-reach bottle and sitting down. Sure, Austen greeted, his earlier anger forgotten. This here is Bobo. She wants to marry me. Bobo? Meet Sterling, he said, pouring Sterling a glass. Sterling gulped his drink to catch up with his friend's growing delirium. The merriment and loud bursts of laughter caused Princess to jump from Austen's lap when they got too raucous. Glad for Sterling's company, Austen happily filled their glasses over and over again, until Bobo, too, lay empty on the table, neck to neck with her twin sister, and the two men slept soundly through the rest of the day and that night. Austen awoke the next morning a long time after the sun had risen, wishing he'd never met Bobo. He slowly got up, gleaming through the portal, and quickly brought his hand to his aching head. He looked over to find Sterling laid out under his desk. "Sterling, rise and shine," he called, and began to dress. With his breeches and boots secured, he looked back to the still sleeping Sterling. "Come on," he said feebly. "Get up. Get up," he ordered as loud as his aching head permitted. The body groaned, but didn't budge. Austen sighed, gave up, and left him to sleep. His head was pounding so hard it threatened to split in two, leaving his body to walk blindly in circles. Lucas entered. "Austen, you are awake." "Aye, not so loud," he groaned, his hand finding his tortured head. "Sterling still asleep?" Austen looked dumbly toward the desk. "I'm going to let him sleep for a while. He doesn't feel so good." "You don't look so good," Luke said, and giggled. "How about making me some coffee? Strong coffee." Lucas happily bounced to the stove, eager to do the simple task. Bending to his trunk for a clean shirt, Austen's pounding head protested loudly, and he went back to his bunk to sit down. "God, I feel terrible." He inched backward to lean against the wall. "Are you sick?" "No, I'm fine. It's just early," he groaned, rubbing his temples. "It's not early." Austen laughed in agreement at the sound of the little giggle. "Do you and Sterling have the same thing?" "Aye, that we do. We'll be fine." It was too much rum. Austen raised an eyebrow, his head resting back against the wall. "It was?" "Yep." "Right again. You're certainly a smart one this morning." Lucas picked up the hot cup of coffee. "This afternoon," he corrected cheekily. "Be quiet and put that on the table to cool. Lucas also brought him a level of serenity. The carefree youth, the innocence. He didn't know exactly what it was, but he was eternally grateful for it. "Come here," Austen requested, quietly patting the bunk beside him. Lucas happily complied and climbed up beside Austen. Austen held out an arm for a hug, then wondered if the boy thought himself too old for such affection. Luke, however, nestled right up to him, allowing Austen's arm to enclose him. "Did you help in the galley this morning?"
"No, I taught. You know, Austen, I've been thinking. The other men talk a lot easier than you do."
"I know." He hugged the boy closer. "But you'll appreciate it when you're older."
"Oh, I appreciate it now," he assured him.
Austen's head leaned against the boy's. "I'm sure you do." "So, you taught what?"
"I taught Jule and Sylvina how to play cards."
Austen inwardly groaned. He was trying very hard not to let Julienne into his thoughts, but here she was. "You did, huh?"
"They are very nice."
"They
are."
Think so?"
"Of course. They're really fun too. I spent all morning with them. First, I took them breakfast. Then I stayed and taught them cards."
"You didn't show them the tricks I showed you?"
"Those are secret."
Austen winked. "That's my boy."
"Then I went and got them more water."
He suddenly pushed away from Austen.
"You should see the fan they made."
Aye. There was a short silence, and his curiosity grew. He tried not to, but he asked anyway. "Does it work?"
"It's the best fan I've ever seen. Sylvina says it was all Jules's idea. She must be really smart. Probably as smart as you."
Austen's face showed exaggerated surprise.
"Only kidding. No one's as smart as you. Someday I want to be as smart as you."
Austen looked down at the innocent face. "Someday, Luke, you're going to be smarter than I am."
"How do you know?"
he asked quietly. "I just know, Luke, because I'm smart."